Good morning, everyone. The name of this week's parsha is Bechukotai, and the opening words of this week's parsha says, "Im Bechukotai telecho," which, if you translate it literally in English, it means if you will walk in my statutes. So Rashi says, what does it mean, walk in my statutes? So Rashi says, it means if you will study Torah. And the question is, how does Rashi take the words, if you will walk in my statutes? Statutes are usually commandments. How does he translate that to mean that it's referring to the study of Torah? One of the two explanations amongst many. One is that the word bechukotai in Hebrew has a dual meaning. On the one hand, it means statutes, but on the other hand, the word chukotai could mean engraved. For example, on Shavuot, which we'll celebrate just in a little over 2 weeks, we got the Torah 3,331 years ago, and the Ten Commandments weren't written like our Torah scrolls with ink on parchment. They were engraved in the stone. And it says they were chakuk, they were engraved in the stone. What's the advantage and the disadvantage of engravement? The disadvantage is it's a lot harder to engrave letters on a stone than it is to write with a pen or with ink on parchment. But the advantage of engravement is that it's permanent. Letters on a paper could fade, they could smudge. Letters engraved on a stone are for eternity. So the Torah says that it's not just that the Torah is the statutes. The Torah has to be engraved on the person. Meaning, Jewish education is something that when you're a child, you learn things and it's engraved in you and it remains with you forever and it becomes part and parcel of your identity. What you learn becomes your way of thinking, your way of acting in this world. So Torah knowledge and education is like engraving out on a stone. Yes, it takes a lot of effort to teach Torah to a child and to yourself as an adult, but it remains part and parcel of your identity, and it remains engraved in your mind, in your heart, in your soul. And therefore Rashi says, Chukotai means to engrave the words of Torah within yourself. And it should have a permanent impression and impact on you. The second word that Rashi says is telechu. The Torah says you should go in my statutes. And therefore he says telechu means the study of Torah. Why? Because the word for the body of Jewish law is called halacha. Halacha means to walk, holech. Why is Torah law called halacha? Because the purpose of Torah is to have an influence on a person to metamorphose, to evolve, to better themselves, to always be journeying towards a higher place, to a higher point. We should never become stagnant in our life. We should always be growing. We could be sitting and learning Torah in one position, but we're moving, we're growing, we're evolving, we're becoming more enlightened, we're developing our character. And therefore, the word telecho implies movement. Movement implies Torah study, which causes you to move. As a matter of fact, something fascinating. The word lamed in Hebrew means, lamed mem daled means to learn. Lamed. But it's also a letter in the Hebrew alphabet, the letter lamed. It's like the L letter. But what's fascinating is that in Hebrew, when you put certain letters before words, it changes the meaning of the word. For example, when you put a lamed before a word, it means to. So if I want to say to my house, in English I say to my house. In Hebrew, I just take the word bayit, which means house. I add a lamed, and it means to, live by it, to the house. So the word lamed means to learn, and it means to go. In other words, the whole idea of Torah study is to help you move along the journey of life and reach a greater and greater point and destination in your life. Just a quick story of how the words of Torah education could have such an impact. It's a true story. There was a rabbi in California who was running a summer camp, and he took his kids to an amusement park. And they went into the arcade room. And people were, buying tokens to play the arcade games. And he sees one of his campers who was online to get arcade coins. And a man took out his wallet, and he took out his cash. He dropped the dollar bill on the floor. And the kid who was online bent down, picked up the dollar, and put it in his pocket. The counselor, the rabbi, was shocked to see this kid steal the dollar. But before he had a chance, there was another kid online who took his dollar, dropped it on the floor, tapped the man on the shoulder, and said, "I think you dropped something." And the man said, "Thank you." He gave him back his dollar. So the counselor was so impressed with the second kid who gave his own dollar to the man. So he called him aside and he said, "I saw what you did. Why did you do that?" He said, "I'll tell you why." He says, "When I was a kid, my grandfather, blessed memory, had a grocery store. and my mother would come home from work late, and my father, so the bus would drop me off. I would hang out in the grocery store with my father. And then my mother would pick me up from the grocery store. And one day, a customer came in, and he was buying his things, and he was paying my grandfather, and he dropped $1. And I walked over, kicked the $1 to the side, put it in my pocket, and walked away. He says, when the customer left the store, my grandfather leaned over the counter, dropped $1 on the floor, and said, "Excuse me, sir, I think you dropped something." And he gave it back to the customer. And I realized my grandfather saw what I had done. So after the customer left, I was so embarrassed. I went over to my grandfather and I said, "I'm so sorry," and I gave him back the $1 that I had stolen from the man. And he says, my grandfather looked at me with the saddest eyes. And he said to me, "David, from you I expected better." And he never said another word about it. And I always lived with that embarrassment that I disappointed my grandfather by taking that $1, by stealing. And he said, when I saw the man drop the $1, I remember what happened in my grandfather's store. And I remembered my grandfather's words to me. And he says, I immediately did what my grandfather did, which is I gave him back the $1. And he said, I hope my grandfather was looking down from heaven. I hope I made him proud of me today. The words that we teach children last forever. And therefore the Torah says, if you want your child to journey through life till 120 years and keep on doing the right thing, make sure you teach them the words of the Torah, which will put them on a trajectory and a journey which they will continuously grow and go from one height to the next.